something you mentioned when we started talking about conservatism is the challenge of having to go out in Democrat areas, blue areas, liberal areas, and affect conservative reform. I can empathize with that since I'm from Camden County, part of the world not all too different from where you hail from. How do we go about getting our Republican leadership to pursue some of the issues that you and I know can help build Republican majorities in these parts of the world? I mean, something I think of that you brought up right off the bat is education reform, school choice. I think that's a winning issue. It's popular among minorities, Hispanics, Catholics, the middle class who's, if they want to have their kids go to a decent school in some districts, they have to pay taxes as well as shell extra money out of their pocket to be able to afford private education. How do we go about getting our leaders to take up these issues, not only so we can get these positive reforms, but so we can also start winning elections and growing our party again?
Well, I think Jay Weber is a good appointment for a state party chair. And I think Jay appreciates that you have to put a message out there. Gingrich used to call it an agenda worth voting for. If you actually go back and listen to go-back tapes from the late 80s and early 90s, he would describe it as an agenda worth voting for. And what happens when you put forward an agenda like that was you make it possible for candidates in marginal districts to be able to compete, whereas it's almost impossible if you don't as a party. If you don't put forward an agenda like that the entire party begins to push, what happens is you leave it to the individual candidate in a marginal district to try to effectively create a message. It's hard to do that if you're not independently wealthy, which most candidates are not. Especially when you're in a district which is, again, not particularly Republican. One of the things, if it's overwhelmingly Republican, it's easier to raise money just because there's more people in the district who share your philosophy and are willing to invest in it. But additionally, there's a certain amount of people who contribute to the candidate just because they think they're going to win. And if it's more of a Democratic district than a Republican district, all that money ends up going to the Democratic side. So you end up with a candidate who, again, unless you have that rare candidate who's extremely wealthy on their own, you end up with a situation where it's hard for candidates to raise money. There's not a lot of Republicans, so they're not the likely, winner. So how do you get people to give money to you? Well, you have to get this, message out, but you don't have money to get the message out. So it leaves them in a really tough shape. And nobody knows, say campaigning on biography, I would argue, is never a particularly great thing to do for anything except for a presidential candidate, potentially. Because you don't get enough media attention for people to know what's really true about you. So you could go out there, for instance, running for governor, and say, vote for me, look at this wonderful biography. And your opponent could go out and say you're a crook. And how's the voter going to know who's telling the truth? If you're running for president, they might know, because there'll be so much intensive investigation that the press will potentially establish that, yes, John McCain actually did spend time in the Hanoi Hilton, and he, in fact, did decide not to come back to America, and be released early, even though as the son of an admiral he could have been, because he didn't think it would be fair to be released earlier than people who were there longer. So, I mean, you could actually have the heroism of someone, the biography of someone like that actually get known. But if they're running for governor, you'd say that's the truth about you, and your opponent would say, no, you're a crook. Well, again, people wouldn't even know that, what the case was. Again, unless you're so wealthy that you could advertise like crazy, and then they wouldn't know either. All at least, in place of knowledge, they'd have the impression created by your advertising. They actually wouldn't know it from these third-party objective sources because you don't get that much media coverage. If you're a local candidate, forget about it. The only people who would actually know is that very small percentage of voters who take the initiative on their own, whether you spend a dime on communications or not, or whether the media ever says a thing about you or not, to find out all the facts on their own. And that is a very small number of people. So, given that, the way you win is you go out there and you talk about issues that matter to people, and it becomes not about you, but it becomes about whether they support your agenda. And if you're out there trying to establish profile for an agenda all on your own, again, it's just hard to be heard because of lack of money and resources. So if the party goes out and everybody in the party says, you know, here are the 5 things that we are going to deliver if you vote for us, and everybody is saying that through sheer iteration of many voices, it can be heard, even if the party doesn't have a bundle of cash. And if the party doesn't do that, then you've lost even that opportunity. So it makes a huge difference that the party crams an agenda, and I think you know, with Weber, there's a greater prospect of you know, the state party saying, here are issues that we Republicans stand for, and encouraging our candidates to run on that as a party, and to reiterate, you know, to each independently reiterate those issues, so through that multitude of voices, you can be heard, even if you don't have the kind of cash the Democrats have.
This is probably the easiest question I could ask you, because I'm sure you already have the answer prepared in your mind. There's been a lot made on our side of the aisle about what a poor job, an abysmally poor job, John Corzine done in managing this state.
Right.
If you had won the primary in 2005 and gone on and been elected governor, as I had voted for the record, my first statewide Republican vote in New Jersey, what would Bret Schundler have done differently to avert the current fiscal crisis that we're dealing with?
Well, the first thing I would have done is I would have, if you remember, the focus of that campaign was spending limitation amendments. So it was actually, and if you also remember, what we're trying to do in the campaign, I believed if I had won the nomination that the party would have supported the campaign approach I wanted to take. I do believe the vast majority of Republicans in New Jersey supported the specific elements of the legislation I was focusing on. What it would have done, if you remember, is it would have implemented a formula on how much each level of government in New Jersey can increase spending before they. It would limit how much you can increase spending before you have to go and get voter approval. In effect, it would be constitutionally mandating that if a politician has got to dramatically increase spending and the probability of raising your taxes in the future, they'd have to get your approval. I think overwhelmingly Republicans would support that. So if I won the nomination, I think you could have gotten broad party